它分，但是事实上我们在舞台上面，这个戏曲还是分了文戏跟武戏，啊，所以这里面在这个4章里面是不是很全面的，只是部分的。
So this is a very truncated explanation of the 4 archetypes because within Jing opera there's also the division of Wen drama and Wu drama, meaning literary dramas and martial dramas, right? So that you have stories that are much more, a sentimental or a kind of a softer storyline, and also martial storylines. And so in those, and there are other further divides and further archetypes and further positionings.
各位不要看这些化妆不同的化妆，这个最主要的一个原因就是，这个一般的看戏的民众他都是文盲，所以呢他没有办法从这个演员的这个立即看到这个角色是谁，但是因为有了这些不同的装扮，也就是我们在京剧的舞台上面把所有的人分了不同的类型，分成不同的类型，所以我们会有老生，会有小生，会有花脸，会有小花脸，就这些都是男性的角色，就是因为区隔了他的个性，借由他的声音啊、化妆啊、脸谱啊，能够形成不一样的人的种类。
So one aspect of regional opera and traditional opera that one should remember. Okay, I'm just going to make one quick editorial side. I'm thrilled at the audience side, but we are I think we're making Trey very nervous because we are really reaching maximum occupancy, and also this is a fire lane, right? So we cannot sit on the stairs or block the fire lane. You can temporarily, I think, squat here. When we demo, maybe people will have to scoot around a little bit, okay? But maybe 现在先做一下好吗？对. So you guys, especially students, don't mind kind of just squatting around. But you can't block the lanes. Right?
这只能到这里啊。
到，没关系。老师要开始表演的时候，我们就可能要散一下，好不好 ？Okay, when the performance happens, we will have to move around a little bit. But right now, we can do this. So 不好意思。没有这样，我们现在有那个老茶馆的感觉，对不对？对，大家坐的。然后one of the things that Wei Laoshi was stressing is that because the early audiences of opera were primarily non-literate, so they were not reading words, or they did not know the plays as written text. Unlike, say, Kun opera is actually a very text-based opera tradition. So the archetypes very clearly delineated for the audience what the roles were supposed to be, whether they were supposed to be goodies or baddies, or who was going to be the romantic lead. And so the kind of archetypal mask and role, it was a very, very big part of the experience of Beijing opera. The other aspect is that they were all male roles, and this will lead us to the next point. But that whether it be old man, Lao Shen, or Xiao Shen, or whatever, Jing, or Hua Lian, they are all men's roles.
那么很值得介绍的就是我们的花脸，这个大家都知道，它这个在脸上会画了很多图案。那么其实这个是有一个历史背景的，据说是兰陵王，因为她长得很漂亮，在打仗的时候呢，敌人都会笑她啊，长得太秀气了。于是呢，后人演绎她的故事呢，就是戴了一个面具，也就是说，知道兰陵王知道自己漂亮，于是打仗的时候就戴了一个很凶猛的一个面具，所以后人在演他的故事的时候呢，就是戴了个面具。但是因为京剧的艺术呢，它是唱念做打为主的，它要唱，所以呢，他就直接把这个脸谱呢就画在脸上，就发现其实这有一个更好的一个结果，就是我们一般这个长得很粗犷、很豪迈的这个男性啊，当他脸上画了这个花脸以后啊，好像这个跟脸上的这肌肉啊合在一起以后，这个脸好像会活起来的，就感觉到这个人好像长得就是那个样子。
So just to introduce one of the archetypes a little bit, that most people are familiar with the painted face, role, and that legend has it, it was that the king of Lanling, was an incredibly handsome and also maybe rather feminine looking king, and so going into battle as a warrior, people sort of didn't take him seriously. So he apparently sort of originated the painted face, mask look to be a ferocious warrior going into battle. And then it became that when legends of Lanling Wang were told that they would be represented by the painted face archetype. But Wei Laoshi also pointed out that one of the really interesting things about the painted face is it usually had actors who had themselves a fairly dramatic, aggressively masculine, I guess, mien. And so that once painted, it's as if their muscles and their expressions moved along with the dramatic outlines of the paint. It was important also that faces were painted rather than just expressed, because Jing opera has as its four main characteristics, chang, which is the singing. And so in order not to interrupt the singing, it couldn't be masked like many other theatrical traditions that we think of that have masks. So it was painted rather than a mask.
好，我们再看下一张，这就是梅兰芳。
So this is Mei Lanfang. So I think most people know who Mei Lanfang is, or well, one of the things actually we were talking over at lunch is how many film adaptations of Mei Lanfang's dramatic life there have been. And one of the a couple highlights, I think this is all written, is, but Mei Lanfang really, I mentioned that the Lao Sheng was really the superstar and had multiple generations of superstars playing the Lao Sheng, the older man's role. And plays, Jing operas were usually centered around Lao Sheng, but Mei Lanfang really originated the idea of a Peking opera that's centered around the young, beautiful woman, the Dan. And he was the most beautiful woman of them all. And he was the great female impersonator. It wasn't that there were entirely no women actors. In fact, some famous women actors were Lao Shen, right? But it was considered that he was the pinnacle of portraying the beautiful young woman. So I see someone cosplaying today too, so how exciting. But no, I mean, so one of the things is this notion of sort of costuming and the beauty of him. Yeah. This is a kind of a contemporary photo of him. Yeah.
那么接下来呢，我就带来一段示范，就是示范梅兰芳的这个流派，他的表演。那么我今天带来的是《贵妃醉酒》这出戏。我们接下来看。
我们先对。我先稍微介绍一下您的视野好吗？不，就是贵妃醉酒前面还没有介绍梅兰芳，对，会再换回的梅兰芳的几出戏，可能介绍一下。
OK， 那么这个呢，就是梅兰芳大师他在几个时期所创造不同的戏，中间的这个呢，各位看到它是一个民初的少女的造型，这个就是他当年最早的时候开始创造的现代戏的系列。
So in his earliest, this is actually one of the earliest extant photos of him. As you can see, he's actually in contemporary dress, right? He's in early Republican dress, and he was in Xingxi, new drama, which was what we consider contemporary drama. So this is one of his first kind of stage performances. Yeah.
那么因为当时满清刚刚被推翻，民国开始，所以整个的这个中国是非常混乱的，很多的价值观念是很多的冲突的，所以当时有很多的社会头条新闻呢，都是这个文化的冲突，比如说指腹为婚的问题，或者说是很多女性被逼良为娼的问题，还有很多就是在这个传统的价值观念在当时是碰到很大的一个冲击的。
So for those of you who are less familiar with the early Republican era and China and the sort of cultural scene of China in the 1910s and 20s, this was of course a moment of clash of tradition and modernity, and as well as a moment of empire and China's role in the world. And so as a result, Xingxi, new drama, was usually a depiction of contemporary issues such as arranged marriage versus free love, or women, actually Ibsen's A Dollhouse was one of the most well-known dramas that was staged in China, and actually Madame Mao played her at one point in Shanghai. And so, that they also often focused on the idea of the new woman and what would happen to her if she left home. And so that was usually the content of new drama.
那么，但是因为这些现代戏呢，都是演的当代人的故事，所以他的穿着、他的言行举止都是现代人的样貌。结果他们演了几年，就是当时不仅仅是梅兰芳演，很多人都开始演这个戏，确实是受到很大的欢迎。但是演了几年之后，就发现京剧所有唱念做打的功夫，在这个新戏里面，通通都没有办法运用了。
So, for a few years, this style new drama was very popular, and a lot of Peking opera actors, in fact, participate in new drama, including Mei Lanfang. But after a few years, maybe kind of the issue, this is a little bit the issue play, that style became less popular. And also for a lot of Peking opera actors, they felt the elements of their training, of singing, of recitative, of martial arts, of display, were not part of, this new drama, and so a lot of them then drifted away from the contemporary art form.
我举个简单例子，我们在台上这个开门，这个门是这样开的啊，但现代人就要这样子开了，所以这种基本的表演就完全就是被打破了哈。
老师，我翻译一下，你再示范一下。So what Wei Laoshi was saying that for traditional drama, this is how a door is opened. But so this is how they were trained as Jing opera singer. But but then they had to adapt to a new style for new opera, and I think so for a lot of them, they didn't feel that the reward was there for continued participation in new drama.
对，所以后来他们都不演了。接着就是第二个阶段，就是梅兰芳，因为太美了，她自己太美了，于是呢，她就创作了10出古装戏。这古装戏的衣服都是有腰身的啊，以前男人扮女人的衣服都是没有腰身的，所以你胖瘦高矮都可以穿。
So the second stage of Mei Lanfang's career was when he actually, with his collaborator Qi Wushan, basically created 10 new Beijing operas, and in which it was historical costuming, and actually a big aspect of the historical costuming was corseted waists, right? That all previous female impersonators just wore robes and did not, so you could be fat or skinny, tall or short. But this Mei Lanfang really embodied the new sort of body-conscious, bodycon version of Peking opera.
所以呢，也就是梅兰芳借由了这几出戏，把她在舞台上的这个美女的形象呢，带给了中国人一个很大的一个这个满足，就是因为过去的人都是从文字当中、从绘画当中去感受到女性的美，但是梅兰芳把一个真的美人搬上了舞台。
So I think that one of his great sources of fascination for his contemporary audience was that a style of traditional beauty that was imagined, that was represented in painting and in text and in stories, was suddenly represented on stage in a very, very vivid visual style, from dress to affect to to bodycon, to all these things. And so that was part of the fascination, was suddenly also a kind of modern technology, right? The kind of appearance of this traditional beauty, but now embodied on stage that people could see.
所以他也就建立了一个京剧非常著名的一种审美的这种观念。
And he really created the aesthetics of Beijing opera, but maybe something to be emphasized is that this was a phenomenon of the 1910s and 20s rather than earlier. So this was brand new. I was actually telling Wei Laoshi at lunch that newspapers of the time had basically tabloid columns that said Mei Zong, that said, follow Mei on his daily adventures. And so, it's basically the paparazzi of the time kept that close tabs on Mei Lanfang.
那么这个时期就比较是后期的，就是中国一些古代的女性，她重新的在为她们这个塑造了一个强而有力的一个形象。
So in one of the, sort of slightly later, he also created new plays in which creating an image of the new traditional woman, right? The martial woman, the warrior woman, the fiercely loyal woman. And so he really expanded the possibility of roles of women in Chinese opera, in Beijing opera.
过去的这个女性的角色啊，青衣、花旦、刀马旦是完全是不同的角色。青衣就是唱的，花旦就是做表。刀马旦就是会有武功的，但是梅兰芳呢，她首先就是把这3种不同的这种表演的女性呢，她都演出了，所以后来也为我们这个后代的演员呢，提供了很好的一种表演的宽广度。
So traditionally, women's roles usually came in 3. Qingyi is usually the kind of blue gown. Women's role is usually emphasized on singing. So if you think of, 杜丽娘人、牡丹亭 or something,
以唱为主。
Yeah, for singing. And then Hua Dan was really, in terms of the whole affect, which is really what he was known for, but also Dao Ma Dan, which is the sword and horse Dan, right, would be the kind of martial, the woman warrior. But what was interesting for May is in his new dramas, he basically combined all 3 often in roles, and so expanded the possibility of portrayal of the Dan, the young woman role.
好的，那我们接下来就来看这个我今天要示范的。
好像还有一
还有
我们很快带过。
还有一张就是1930年梅兰芳到美国来的时候，跟各个不同的行业的人见面。
So I think this is familiar to all of you who already are Mei Lanfang fans, but maybe it's worth emphasizing what a superstar he is to those of you who are not as familiar. But one of the aspects is not only was he a superstar within China, but he, in his 1930 trip in the U.S. and Europe, where he met with Charlie Chaplin, got a doctorate, and had a huge impact on sort of silent cinema and thinking about. Also in 1935, I don't think it's in the side, but Mei Lanfang also went to a Soviet Union film festival, met Sergei Eisenstein, was partially filmed by him, and was credited at that moment for really inspiring Bertolt Brecht, alienation cinema, but in theater style, but also Eisenstein's, sort of more theatricality as opposed to, you could say, realism in film. So, so he's had this kind of very interesting transnational impact. Now we get to the. So one of the new plays that he's known for is actually based on the Tang, legend, of course, of Yang Guifei, the beautiful, actually also known as the chubby concubine, right? But like a very voluptuous concubine of the Tang Dynasty, who was also kind of blamed for the downfall of the dynasty in a sense. And it's a very simple play in the sense that the play itself really just focuses on her being drunk, right? Her being tipsy, her being drunk, and she holds a fan and wears a costume. But Wei Laoshi today will not be demonstrating necessarily the drunken famous scene, but the scene where she's getting ready to go to the party.
不过这出戏呢，非常特别的原因就在于说，杨贵妃的表演剧情很简单啊，就是唐明皇约她喝酒，唐明皇没有来，她就生气就喝醉了。但是这个戏其实要演出1个小时零10分钟。
It's a very simple play, and it's all just that she is asked by Tang Minghuang, her, kind of slightly complicated relationship. Another time, and she father-in-law really, right? And then, and then she goes and she's very excited, but then also she doesn't get to go. He forgets, and then she gets angry. So that's all it. But it's a 1 hour and 10-minute opera.
那么这里面有很多的表现，我只取其中一个，跟各位介绍这个就是京剧的表演非常的不同啊。比如我们说一般的人的喝醉一定很难看嘛，就是会东倒西歪的，然后要哭，就很难看的哈。但是京剧的表演是不一样的，是贵妃的醉呢， 就跟别人的醉都不一样。
So, when we think about getting drunk and sort of, it's not a very attractive, or you're going to bend over to puke, etc. So it's not what we might think of as like beautiful and elegant. But for imperial concubine, you want this to be an elegant tipsiness. And so part of the sophistication of the opera is the movement.
那我就表演他吐的感觉。